The wind swept through the canyon like a wild spirit, carrying with it the scent of rain and the faint echo of a distant drum. Evening light spilled over the desert, painting the red rocks gold and copper. A lone rider moved along the ridge, her silhouette sharp against the fading sun. Her horse was tired, its sides darkened with sweat, but she didn't slow down. She had been riding since dawn. There was no room left in her heart for fear, only the urgency that kept her going. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting to see riders behind her, but the horizon was empty. Still, she knew better than to trust the silence. The desert had a way of hiding what it didn't want seen. Her name was Clara, and she had come farther than she ever thought she would, farther than anyone from her quiet frontier town would dare. It wasn't courage that brought her here, not exactly. It was something else, something she couldn't name. The sun slipped lower, and she could feel the chill creeping in with the dusk. Somewhere beyond the ridges lay the territory she was warned never to cross, the land of the Apache. She'd heard stories all her life, most told in whispers over firelight, about the warriors who moved like shadows, about the fierce pride of their people, about the vengeance they carried for every broken promise. Yet Clara had not come for tales or trouble. She had come because she had to. The sound of hooves behind her snapped her thoughts in half. She reined her horse sharply and turned, heart pounding. Dust rose in the distance, small but steady. She couldn't tell how many riders there were, only that they were coming fast. She looked to the east, to the jagged hills and deep ravines, the last line between her and what she sought. If she could make it before they caught her, maybe, just maybe, she would find the one she had been told about. A man who lived apart from both worlds. An Apache who once saved a white settler's life and was cast out for it. They said he was a ghost now, more myth than man, hiding deep in the desert canyons where no one dared to follow. But Clara had a name, one given to her in a hurried whisper by an old woman who'd once seen him. She called him the Wolf of the Sierra. Her horse stumbled on a loose rock, breaking her focus. She steadied the reins, urging it forward. The wind picked up again, sweeping through the narrow pass, carrying the cry of a hawk overhead. When she finally reached the edge of the canyon, she stopped to catch her breath. The world stretched out below, wild, endless, beautiful, and cruel. For a moment, she thought she was alone. Then she saw movement near the shadowed rocks. A man stepped into view, tall and still as the land itself. His hair was long, bound loosely at the nape of his neck. His eyes caught the light like flint striking stone. He wore no uniform, no badge of belonging, just the plain, weather-worn clothes of a man who had lived too long under the sun. Her first instinct was to turn her horse and flee. But something in his presence held her there. He didn't reach for a weapon. He simply stood, watching her, as though he'd known she was coming. "You're on Apache land," he said finally, his voice deep and even. "I know," she answered, surprising herself with how steady she sounded. "I came to find you." He said nothing for a while. The silence stretched between them, heavy as the air before a storm. "People don't come here unless they've lost something," he said at last. "What is it you've lost?" She hesitated. The truth was tangled and painful, and she wasn't sure how much she could give away. "Someone I care about. Someone taken." The man's eyes narrowed slightly. "By my people." She swallowed hard. "I don't know, but I was told you could help me find them." He studied her for a long time, then stepped closer, his movements slow but certain. The way he carried himself made her uneasy, not because he seemed dangerous, but because he seemed so sure. It was as though he had already decided how this would go. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "The desert doesn't forgive." "I'm not asking it to forgive," she said. "I just need to find him." He looked away, toward the horizon where the last light was slipping away. Then he turned back and said, "If I touch you, there'll be no turning back." The words hung between them like a warning, and yet they carried something else, something unspoken that neither could name. Clara's breath caught. She didn't understand why her heart beat faster, or why the sound of his voice made the air feel different. He reached out, his hand hovering near her arm, not yet touching. She could feel the warmth of him, even through the space between them. His eyes searched hers, looking for something she couldn't hide. "I don't scare easy," she said softly. His expression didn't change, but there was a flicker in his gaze, something like respect or regret. Then finally he placed his hand on her arm. It was not rough, but firm, grounding her in a way she hadn't expected. And just like that, the world around them shifted. The canyon felt smaller, the air thicker. Somewhere, thunder rolled low across the desert, and the wind carried the promise of rain. "You've crossed into a place that doesn't belong to you," he said. "Once I take you through, you can't go back to the life you knew." "I don't have a life to go back to," she replied. He nodded, as though he had known that all along. "Then we ride before dark." He turned to lead the way down a narrow path carved into the canyon wall. Clara followed, her heart still beating fast. Every step echoed with a mix of fear and strange anticipation. She didn't know where he was taking her, or what waited beyond those shadows, but she knew this was the path she was meant to take. The descent was rough. More than once her horse slipped on loose stone. The man rode ahead with ease, moving like he was part of the land itself. The deeper they went, the darker it became. The air smelled of sage and rain. She could hear the distant rush of water somewhere below, though she couldn't see it yet. When they reached the bottom, the canyon opened into a hidden valley. It was unlike anything she had imagined, lush with wild grass and the sound of running streams. The last light of day flickered through the branches of mesquite trees. For a moment, Clara forgot where she was. It felt like stepping into another world, untouched and secret. "This is where you live?" she asked, her voice low. He dismounted and looked around, scanning the ridges as though expecting eyes in the shadows. "Sometimes," he said, "the land moves, and so do I." She dismounted, 2 legs aching from the long ride. "Will they find us?" she asked. "They might," he said, "but the desert hides those who belong to it." Clara looked at him again, her heart tightening with questions she couldn't ask. Who was this man really? What kind of life had made him speak like that, half-warning, half-prophecy? The sound of a far-off horse echoed faintly, and he turned his head sharply toward the canyon mouth. For the first time, she saw a flicker of concern cross his face. "They're coming," he said. "You led them here." "I didn't mean to." He raised a hand to silence her. His eyes hardened, the calm giving way to something fierce and focused. "Then we don't have much time." The wind rose again, whipping through the valley. The horses stirred nervously. Clara could feel the tension tightening like a noose around them. He moved closer to her once more, his voice low but steady. "Stay close to me. No matter what happens, you don't run." She wanted to ask why. Wanted to understand what was about to happen, but before she could speak, he reached out again, his hand firm on her shoulder. "If I touch you, there'll be no turning back," he said once more. His tone, different, no softer, almost resigned. And this time, he didn't let go. The sound of riders thundered through the canyon, and the first drops of rain began to fall, darkening the earth beneath their feet. The storm was coming fast, and so were the men behind it. Clara met his eyes, and in that single moment, she knew her life was about to change forever. "You said, continue from where the introduction left off, and write the next."
Oh.
1,200 words for my story. This part should provide background and context, helping to deepen the plot and characters. Keep building suspense, but don't resolve any of the tension created in the previous section. Expand on the mystery or conflict, and keep the narrative engaging with additional relevant keywords. Also, do not make any headings. Only write story in paragraphs. Also, keep the wording simple and natural tone. Also, make the script human-centric, and don't give feel of AI-generated. Also, don't create violated content which can affect YouTube policy. AI sees the ellipsis as 3 dots, so it reads it as ... That's why do not use 3 or 2 dots collectively, ChatGPT said. The rain came fast, soaking the dry ground and filling the air with the sharp scent of wet earth. The sky darkened until the canyon was only a shadowed outline against flashes of lightning. Clara stood still beside her horse, her pulse racing as the Apache warrior, this man who had warned her twice, tightened his hold on her arm. His grip was steady, not cruel, but full of command. When another crack of thunder split the air, he turned toward the far ridge, eyes narrowing at the sound of hooves closing in. "They're close," he said quietly. "We have to move." She didn't argue. Her heart was already pounding too hard. He led her through the narrow trail that twisted deeper into the canyon. Water poured down from the rocks, and the ground turned slick beneath their boots. The horses snorted, uneasy with the storm. Still, the man moved with purpose, as if he knew every turn by heart. They crossed a narrow stream and entered a hidden hollow, protected by leaning walls of red stone. He signaled her to stay quiet and crouched low, scanning the path they'd come from. The rain masked their tracks, but Clara could still hear the faint, distant rhythm of horses in pursuit. Whoever those men were, they weren't giving up. When the thunder rolled again, he turned back to her. "You brought a storm with you," he said, his tone half an observation, half a warning. "I didn't mean to bring anyone," she replied. "They must have been following me since the ridge." His eyes searched hers for a moment, then he nodded slowly. "You said someone was taken?" "Tell me who." Clara hesitated. The truth hurt to speak. "My brother," she said finally. "His name is Eli. A trading party was attacked 2 months ago. Everyone said it was the Apache, but I don't believe that. I found something near the site, a piece of jewelry, the kind a white man would wear. I think it was staged." He didn't react right away, but she saw a flicker of interest in his expression. "Why come all this way alone?" he asked. "No one else would listen," she said. "They've already decided who to blame. But I know my brother's still alive. I can feel it." He studied her a long moment, then looked out toward the storm again. "Feelings are dangerous in a land like this," he said. "They'll blind you faster than the sun." Clara crossed her arms, her voice firm. "Maybe, but it's all I have left." For the first time, something like a faint smile touched his lips. "Kun," gone in an instant. "You've got fire," he said. "It'll keep you alive if you learn to use it." The rain began to ease, softening to a steady drizzle. The sound of pursuit faded, replaced by the rush of water trickling through the canyon floor. He stepped out from under the rock shelter and scanned the path again. When he was certain they weren't followed, he motioned for her to come. They walked their horses until the trail widened into a small clearing, where a fallen tree lay across the ground. He gathered some dry brush from beneath the rocks and started a small fire, careful to shield it from the wind. Clara sat nearby, her hands trembling slightly from cold and nerves. He worked in silence, his movements deliberate and practiced. When the fire caught, he looked up at her again. "You said people told you about me?" he said. "Who?" "An old woman in town," Clara answered. "She said you saved her son years ago, after a raid near the river. She called you the Wolf of the Sierra." His face darkened slightly. "That name belongs to stories," he said. "Stories people tell when they don't understand what really happened." "Then what did happen?" He looked into the fire for a long moment before answering. "I saved a man who didn't deserve saving. For that, I lost my place among my people. The ones who follow the old ways called me traitor. The settlers called me killer. So I left them both behind." His words carried no self-pity, only fact. Clara watched him quietly, realizing how much he had carried alone. "I don't believe you're a killer," she said softly. He looked at her again, and the firelight caught the faint scar running along his cheek. "Belief changes nothing," he said. "Out here, a man's truth is buried under the stories others tell." The wind shifted, and the fire snapped, throwing sparks into the night. Clara drew her coat tighter, thinking of the people she had left behind, the town sheriff who dismissed her, the neighbors who shook their heads and told her to accept what had happened. She had ridden away with nothing but her brother's knife and a map she couldn't fully trust. Now, sitting across from this stranger, she wasn't sure if she'd made the right choice, but she couldn't turn back. "Not now? Will you help me find him?" she asked finally. He didn't answer right away. His gaze drifted to the flames, then to the rain-soaked sky above. "Finding a man in these lands is no small thing," he said. "You could spend a lifetime searching and come back with nothing. I don't care how long it takes." He studied her again, his expression unreadable. "If I help you, you'll be walking a path that ends in blood. There's no peace beyond it." I stopped believing in peace the day they told me my brother was gone. Something shifted in his eyes, then something like recognition. Maybe he saw a part of himself in her stubbornness, the same refusal to surrender. He stood and threw another branch into the fire. "We'll start at first light," he said. "You'll need rest." "The ground will do." Clara nodded, though she doubted she could sleep. She wrapped herself in her blanket and listened to the soft hiss of the fire. The night was filled with strange sounds, the distant call of coyotes, the whisper of water against stone, the rustle of unseen movement in the dark. But beneath it all was the steady rhythm of his breathing, calm and sure. When she finally drifted into uneasy sleep, she dreamed of her brother calling her name from somewhere far away. His voice echoed through the canyons, fading each time she tried to follow. By morning, the rain had stopped, leaving a cool mist over the valley. The air smelled clean, and the ground glistened with moisture. He was already awake, packing the few supplies they had. His horse stood nearby, waiting patiently. "We follow the river north," he said as she stirred. "If your brother was taken, that's where their tracks would lead." Clara rose and brushed the dirt from her coat. "You sound sure." "I know these canyons. I know how men move when they think no one's watching." They mounted their horses and began to ride. The path was narrow, winding through tall rock spires and dry brush. As the sun climbed, the mist lifted, revealing the vast stretch of desert beyond. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the sound of hooves and the occasional call of a hawk overhead. Hours passed before Clara spoke again. "Why did you save that man?" she asked. "The one who cost you everything." He was quiet for a moment before answering. "Because he was dying, and I couldn't watch another life fade when I could stop it. My people saw mercy as weakness that day. The settlers saw it as guilt. It left me with nothing but the truth, and the truth doesn't keep you warm at night." Clara felt the weight of his words. She wanted to say something, but nothing seemed right. The world around them was too vast, too silent for comfort. As they rode deeper into the wilderness, she noticed faint tracks in the dirt, a mix of horse and boot prints. Freshie saw them too and slowed his horse. "They're close," he murmured. "But we don't know who they belong to." Clara's stomach tightened. "Do you think it's them?" "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe someone else who doesn't want to be found." They followed the trail cautiously, staying near the cover of rocks. The prints led toward a bend in the canyon where the river narrowed. Just as they reached it, the wind carried a faint sound men's voices. He raised a hand for her to stop. "Stay here," he whispered. "If they see you, it's over." Before she could reply, he slipped from his horse and moved ahead, silent as shadow. Clara waited, gripping the reins tightly, her heart thudding in her chest. She could just barely make out the outlines of figures near the water, 3, maybe 4. She caught a glint of metal, the shine of a rifle barrel. Minutes passed. The tension built until it was almost unbearable. Then a single sound broke the air, a sharp cry, followed by the echo of a gunshot. The horses startled, and Clara's heart leaped. She didn't know what had happened, only that the quiet was gone and the danger was real. Then, through the haze of dust and light, she saw him returning, moving fast, his face grim. "Ride," he said. Now, Clara didn't ask questions. She kicked her horse forward, following him as they tore through the canyon. The thunder of hooves filled her ears. Behind them, voices shouted, growing fainter with distance but still chasing them through the narrowing pass. When they finally slowed at the next ridge, she looked back and saw nothing but open land. The wind howled through the rocks, and the sun burned low against the horizon. She turned to him, breathless. Who were they? He looked back toward the trail, his jaw tight. Not Apache. White men. Hunters. For what? His eyes met hers, dark and steady. For you. The words hit her like a strike of lightning. The world around her seemed to shrink, filled with the echo of that truth. Whoever those men were, they hadn't come for money or trade. They had come to find her, and the worst part was, she had no idea why. The air was dry again by morning, the storm gone, as if it had never been. The desert looked new under the light, clean and sharp, every stone and cactus edge glinting under the sun. Clara rode behind the Apache warrior, her mind heavy with what he'd said the night before. Men were hunting her. Not her brother. Not some band of raiders. Her. The thought clung to her like the dust. On her boots, the silence between them grew thicker with each mile. She wanted to ask who those men were, or why they would come after her. But something in his steady posture told her he already knew, or at least suspected. The way he watched the land, scanning every ridge and shadow, made her think he had seen this before. He moved like someone always ready for a fight. When they stopped to water the horses, Clara finally broke the silence. "You knew they weren't Apache before you even got close, didn't you?" He looked up from the river, his expression unreadable. The way they moved, the kind of rifles they carried. "Apache don't hunt like that, so who were they?" He hesitated. Could be bounty men. Could be soldiers out of uniform? Or worse. She pressed. He tossed a handful of pebbles into the current, watching them vanish. Sometimes men don't need a reason to hunt. Sometimes they just need a lie to follow. Clara felt a cold twist in her stomach. "You think they were told something about me?" "I think someone wants you not to find what you're looking for." His words carried the same quiet certainty that made everything he said feel like truth. She looked out over the canyon, her thoughts circling back to the beginning, to her brother. The trading party, the stories the townsfolk whispered. If those men were connected to what happened that day, then she was riding straight into the middle of something far larger than she'd ever imagined. The sun was high when they stopped near a cluster of rock. Formations shaped like towers. The Apache dismounted and gestured for her to do the same. "We rest here," he said. "The horses need it." Clara sat in the shade of a boulder, grateful for a bit of relief from the heat. She watched him as he built a small fire, his movements calm and efficient. There was a stillness about him that both comforted and unnerved her. He spoke little, but every time he did, his words carried weight. As the fire crackled, she asked, "Do you ever miss it? The life you had before all this?" He didn't answer right away. "There's no before," he said after a while. "Only what's left after everything else is taken." Clara lowered her gaze. She thought about the home she left behind the porch that faced the empty road. Her mother's worn Bible on the table, the sound of her brother's laughter echoing through the fields. It felt like another lifetime. He looked at her and said, "Tell me about your brother." She smiled faintly. Eli was the kind of man who could fix anything. Always laughing, even when there was nothing to laugh about. He wanted to go west, start a new trade route. Said there was more freedom past the mountains. I told him he was crazy, but he went anyway. The day before he left, he promised he'd send word when he got there. Her voice faltered. The next thing I heard was that his caravan was gone. The sheriff said it was Apache, but the tracks didn't match. I know, because I went out there myself. His eyes narrowed slightly. "You went alone?" "Yes. I found blood, but no bodies. Just the wagon turned over, supplies scattered, and a pendant one my father used to wear. My brother had given it to a man he trusted in town. That's when I knew something was wrong." He leaned forward, his tone low. "And this man, what was his name?" She hesitated. "Oh, Reeves?" "He worked for the trading post. He was the one who told me the Apache had done it." Shadow crossed the Apache's face. "Reeves," he repeated slowly, as if tasting the name. "I've heard it before. He trades with soldiers. Rumor is, he sells information too." Clara's heart sank. "Then he's part of it." "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe someone used him to spread the lie. Either way, he's not far from the truth. We'll find out soon enough." The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of smoke from far away. He rose to his feet instantly, his hand moving to the knife at his belt. Clara tensed. "What is it?" "Campfire," he said quietly. "Too close." He climbed a rock for a better view. When he came down, his expression was grim. "They're less than 2 miles east. For horses, same men as before." Clara's stomach tightened. "They found us. They won't stop," he said. "They're not after gold or ransom. They're after something else." What could they possibly want from me? That's what we need to find out. They broke camp quickly and moved north, keeping two narrow trails. The Apache led her through a maze of cliffs and gullies, always one step ahead of the hunters. As they rode, the sun burned low, casting long shadows across the land. The light turned everything red and gold, and for a brief moment, Clara felt the strange beauty of it all, a land, both dangerous and alive, by nightfall. They reached a plateau overlooking a wide valley. Below them, the river wound like a silver snake through the sand. The Apache pointed toward a cluster of dark shapes near the water. "There," he said, "an old outpost. The army built it years ago, then abandoned it. If we're lucky, we can stay there until morning." They made their way down carefully, avoiding loose rock. The building was half in ruin, its roof caved in, its walls weathered by years of wind and rain. But it was shelter, and that was enough. Inside, Clara found an old lantern and lit it. The light flickered against the cracked walls. She noticed marks etched into the stone symbols, faded but still visible. "What are these?" she asked. He glanced at them briefly. "Apache signs. Warnings, mostly. This place was built on sacred land." "Do they mean we're not safe here?" He shrugged. "No place is safe, but the dead won't trouble us." Clara sat against the wall, her exhaustion catching up with her. "How do you live like this?" she asked softly. "Always running, always looking over your shoulder." He crouched near the doorway, watching the dark. "You stop thinking about what you've lost. You start thinking about what still needs protecting. Do you ever get tired of fighting?" He didn't answer, but she saw the tension in his shoulders, the weight of years she couldn't begin to imagine. There was something in his silence that told her the answer was yes. They stayed awake long after the moon rose. Outside, the night hummed with the sounds of insects and wind. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. Clara dozed off for a while, only to wake to a faint sound, the crunch of gravel under boots. The Apache was already alert, finger to his lips. He motioned for her to stay still. Through the broken slats of the wall, she saw shadows moving between the trees. For men, just as he'd said. Their voices were low, but she caught a few words her name. The promise of a reward. Her heart pounded so loud she feared they'd hear it. The Apache reached for his bow and notched an arrow, his movements smooth and soundless. But before he could draw, one of the men stepped into the open, raising a lantern. The light spilled across the ruins. Landing right on the broken doorway, Clara froze. The Apache's voice was low and fierce. "Stay behind me. Whatever happens, don't run." The footsteps came closer. Then a voice called out, rough and certain. "We know you're in there, girl. No use hiding. The man who sent us wants you alive." Clara's blood ran cold. The Apache's eyes flickered toward her for a brief second, then back to the door. "Alive," he whispered. "That means they're not done using you. Who sent them?" She whispered. He didn't look away from the shadows. "That's what we'll find out if we survive the night." The men outside spread out, their boots scraping against the rock. The lantern light shifted, throwing long, moving shapes across the wall. The Apache drew the string back, waiting for the right moment. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. Then the sound came, a sudden crack of a rifle in the dark. The echo ringing through the valley. The lantern shattered, plunging everything into darkness. The horses whinnied, panicked. Clara dropped to the ground, covering her head as the Apache moved like a blur toward the doorway. The desert, so quiet moments before, erupted into chaos. And in that darkness, she realized she was caught in something far greater than a rescue. Whatever truth lay buried in the desert had finally started to wake. It was coming for both of them. The night burned with noise and fear. The first shot had shattered the stillness like glass, and now every sound carried weight: the shuffle of boots, the creak of a bowstring, the ragged breath of someone hiding death behind patience. Clara pressed herself against the crumbling wall, her pulse hammering in her ears. Dust drifted down from the ceiling each time another shot rang out. The old outpost that had once been her shelter now felt like a trap. The Apache moved with a grace she could barely follow. He fired 2 arrows in quick rhythm, each one slicing through the dark with a hiss. A cry followed from outside, sharp and brief, then silence again. Clara dared to lift her head. The firelight from the broken lantern cast wild shadows over his face, focused calm. But with something fierce in his eyes. "Stay low," he whispered. "I can fight," she said. Though her voice trembled, he didn't look at her. "Not yet. Save your strength for when you'll need it." A new sound cut through the night, men shouting to one another, voices echoing from both sides of the ruins. They were closing in from 2 directions. The Apache shifted, reading the land the way others read a map. "They're trying to box us in," he said. "We move now." He grabbed her arm, and they slipped out through a narrow gap in the wall. The moonlight was faint, filtered through drifting clouds, but it was enough to see the line of their escape. Clara's boots slid on the loose earth as they climbed over broken stone and out into the open. The wind carried the smell of gunpowder and rain-soaked ash. Somewhere behind them, a wounded man groaned. They ran until they reached the riverbank. The Apache dropped to one knee, scanning the dark water. "It's shallow here," he said. "We can cross without leaving clear tracks." Clara waded in after him, the cold biting through her clothes. The current pulled at her legs, strong and fast, but he caught her hand and guided her across. On the far side, they crouched behind a cluster of low shrubs. Clara's teeth chattered, but she didn't dare make a sound. "They'll think we went south," he said quietly. "We ride north," she nodded, too breathless to answer. They followed the river until their horses came into view, where they'd been tied in the brush. The animals were nervous, sensing danger, but obedient. As soon as they mounted, the Apache turned north. Keeping to the shadow of the cliffs, the chase stretched into the early hours. The land grew rougher, filled with thorn bush and rock. Every time Clara thought they had gained distance, the faint echo of riders drifted back through the wind. Whoever was hunting them knew the desert well. As dawn began to touch the horizon, they reached a high ridge overlooking a narrow valley. The Apache stopped and dismounted, his face unreadable in the pale light. Clara followed, her body aching from the night's ride. "We can't keep running like this," she said. "They'll catch us sooner or later." He looked at her, the faintest hint of a plan in his eyes. "They'll catch us only if I let them. There's a way to end this." "How?" He walked to the edge of the ridge and pointed to the far side of the valley. "There's an old Apache stronghold hidden in those cliffs. My people used it long before the wars. Few outside know the way. If we can reach it, they won't follow us in." Clara studied the distance. It looked miles away and impossible. "Can we make it?" "If the sun doesn't kill us first." They rested for only a few minutes before setting out again. The desert stretched wide and merciless. Heat shimmered off the rocks, and every step seemed heavier than the last. The sound of their horses' hooves blended with the wind, steady rhythm that matched the tension in her chest. By midday, they stopped near a cluster of dry brush. The Apache raised his hand for silence, his body tensing. He dismounted, pressed his ear to the ground, and listened. "What is it?" Clara whispered. "Riders," he said. 5 of them. Coming fast. She looked around, panic rising. "There's nowhere to hide." He turned toward a nearby gorge, a narrow cut between the rocks. "There," he said. "It'll slow them down, but we'll have to fight our way out if they find us." Clara followed him into the gorge. The walls closed around them, high and jagged. The air grew cooler, the sound of the wind replaced by the soft echo of dripping water. It was quiet, too quiet. Every shadow seemed alive. The Apache motioned for her to stay behind a boulder while he climbed higher for a better view. She waited, gripping the small revolver she carried, her palms slick with sweat. The silence stretched until she began to think maybe the riders had gone another way. Then she heard it, the unmistakable sound of hooves at the canyon mouth. The Apache slid back down beside her, his face grim. "They're here. Can we escape?" He shook his head. "Not without being seen. We hold them off long enough to make them think we're gone." The first rider appeared, his horse picking carefully over the rocks. The man's hat was low, his rifle ready. Another followed, then another. They fanned out, scanning the narrow passage. The Apache waited until the last rider dismounted. Then, in one swift motion, he loosed an arrow that struck the man's shoulder. The gunfire came instantly, echoing off the canyon walls like thunder. Clara ducked low, heart pounding as bullets sparked against stone. "Stay down," he called. She pressed her back against the rock, breathing hard. The sound of gunfire grew louder, closer. She caught a glimpse of one of the men moving toward them, his rifle raised. Without thinking, she lifted her revolver and fired. The shot missed, but it startled him enough for the Apache to finish what she started. For a moment, everything went still again. Smoke drifted through the canyon, carrying the metallic scent of gunpowder. Clara's hands trembled, the revolver heavy in her grasp. The Apache moved to check the path. "2 down," he said. 3 left. Her voice was barely steady. "How can you be so calm?" He looked at her with quiet honesty. "Because I've seen worse." They didn't have long to catch their breath. The remaining riders regrouped near the entrance, shouting to one another. Clara could make out their words now, her name again, followed by something that sent a chill through her spine. "Bring her alive." "The chief wants her breathing, Chief." The word struck her. "What do they mean by chief?" She asked that the Apache frowned. "Not one of mine. Whoever they serve, he's the one behind this." The shouting grew louder. A bullet ricocheted off the rock inches from her face. She gasped, ducking lower. The Apache grabbed her arm. "We move now." Up the wall. He led her toward a narrow ledge that climbed steeply along the canyon side. The rocks were slick and unstable, but there was no other choice. As they climbed, another shot rang out, grazing the rock beside her hand. Clara slipped, but his hand caught her wrist, strong and sure. "Don't look down," he said. "Keep going." They reached a small plateau near the top just as another bullet whined past. From there, she could see the men below, searching the shadows. One of them raised a spyglass, scanning the ridge. The Apache pressed his back against the wall, pulling her close to stay hidden. She could feel the heat of his body, his heart beat steady against her shoulder. The moment was tense, breathless, filled with danger and something deeper neither of them dared name. After a few minutes, the riders began to move away, their voices fading with the distance. The Apache waited until the sound was gone before exhaling. "They'll think we doubled back," he said. "It buys us time." Clara looked at him, exhaustion and fear mixing inside her. "How long can we keep doing this?" "As long as we have to." They continued north as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in red and gold. The cliffs ahead rose higher, jagged like the teeth of some ancient beast. He said the stronghold lay beyond them. The thought of safety, even temporary, was the only thing keeping her going. By twilight, they reached a narrow path carved into the rock face. The Apache dismounted and led his horse carefully along the edge. Clara followed, her hands trembling as she gripped the reins. Below, the canyon dropped into shadow, deep and endless, halfway across. A distant shot echoed again, followed by the faint sound of hooves. Clara's blood went cold. "They found our trail again," she whispered. The Apache's eyes hardened. "We're too close to turn back." "Keep moving." The final stretch was steep and rough. The horses stumbled, their breaths coming in short bursts. When they finally reached the top, the sight before them stole Clara's breath. Hidden between towering cliffs lay a valley unlike any she'd seen green, even in the dry season, with water glinting through the rocks. In the center stood the ruins of stone dwellings built into the canyon walls. The Apache's people had once lived there. Now, it was silent except for the cry of an eagle circling high above. He turned to her. "We're safe for now." Clara couldn't shake the feeling that safety was an illusion. The men behind them weren't just hunters, they were sent for a purpose. And whatever that purpose was, it had to do with her brother. With the truth buried somewhere in this desert, as darkness fell and the stars returned, she looked toward the horizon where faint lights flickered in the distance. They were coming again. The Apache stood beside her, bow in hand, eyes fixed on the dark ridge beyond. "It ends soon," he said quietly. The wind rose, carrying the echo of hoofbeats through the valley, and in that moment, Clara knew that the next dawn would bring either freedom or the kind of ending that left nothing behind but stories whispered by the wind. The morning came slow and pale, spreading thin light over the valley like a tired hand. The storm of the night before had left the air cool, the ground heavy with the scent of wet dust and smoke. Clara woke to the soft sound of water dripping from the rocks and the quiet movement of the Apache near the fire. His silhouette was sharp against the faint glow, his every motion careful, measured. As though the world might listen too closely, she sat up, her body sore. Her mind still caught between dreams and the harsh truth of where they were. The fire had burned low, its embers pulsing softly, the only warmth left between them. She looked around at the old stone dwellings built into the cliffs, once a home to his ancestors, now hollow and silent. "How long do you think we have before they find us?" she asked, her voice hoarse. He didn't answer right away. He tied the strap of his quiver, glanced toward the edge of the ridge, and then looked back at her. Not long, but long enough for what? To decide what comes next? She stood and wrapped her arms around herself. "You make it sound like there's a choice. There's always a choice," he said quietly. "Even when both roads lead to pain." His words settled between them like dust. Clara walked to the edge of the cliff and looked out over the valley. The sun had begun to rise, touching the far rocks with color. For a moment, it almost looked peaceful, as though the land itself had forgotten what it witnessed the night before. But she hadn't. She thought of the men who had hunted them, of the chief who had ordered her capture. Somewhere out there, they were regrouping, planning their next move. She didn't understand why they wanted her alive. Only that it had something to do with her brother, her only family left. And the truth he had uncovered before he vanished? The Apache joined her, his gaze following the horizon. "You said your brother came out here looking for something," he said. "What was it?" "He was a map maker," she replied. "The army sent him to survey the land after the last treaty." But his letters stopped. The last one mentioned a hidden valley, a place no white man had ever found. He said it was sacred ground. He nodded slowly. "This valley," he said. "Yes," she said. "I think he found this place. And I think someone didn't want him to tell anyone else." For a while, they stood in silence, both staring at the same ridge where danger waited. The wind carried the faint sound of a hawk's cry. "I buried him here," the Apache said at last. Clara turned sharply. "What?" "I didn't know who he was at first," he said, his voice low, steady. "He came with a map and questions. Said he meant no harm. But there were others following him in who wanted what he'd found. He tried to run. I found him near the river wounded. He didn't make it." Her throat tightened. "You knew my brother?" "I knew his courage," he said. "And his last wish was that no one would destroy what they could not understand. He made me promise to keep this valley safe." Clara stared at him, her eyes filling. The truth hit her harder than she expected. "He died trying to protect this place," she whispered. "Yes," he said. "And now they hunt you because they think you can lead them here. They believe you have what he carried." She frowned. "I don't have anything." He studied her for a long moment. Then he said, "Check your jacket." She blinked. "My jacket?" He pointed to the inner lining of the old coat she wore, her brother's coat, the one she'd taken when she left home. Her hands trembled as she slipped her fingers along the seam. There, hidden beneath the cloth, she felt the edge of something thin and folded. She pulled it free, a small, weathered piece of parchment. It was a map. The lines were faint, but clear enough to trace. Symbols she didn't recognize marked different points, and at the center was a drawing of the valley, encircled by a spiral. Her brother's handwriting was still visible in the margins. "He hid it," she said softly. All this time, the Apache studied it with her. "He knew they'd come for it," he said. "That's why he sent you the letters. He trusted you to finish what he started." Before she could speak again, the sound of hooves broke the morning calm. Faint at first, then louder. The Apache's expression hardened. "They found us." He took the map from her hand and tucked it into his belt. "You stay here. If I don't come back, you ride north. There's a pass through the rocks. It will take you to the army post by nightfall. I'm not leaving you, she said. He met her gaze, steady and unyielding. You will if you want his death to mean something. The echo of riders grew closer, dust rising on the far ridge. Clara felt the old panic rising in her chest, but this time it was mixed with something else, resolve. Then I'll fight beside you, she said. He wouldn't have wanted me to run. The Apache hesitated, then nodded once. There was no more time to argue. They took cover among the rocks overlooking the valley's entrance. The riders came into view, a group of 6, led by a man in a black coat. His voice carried icily through the still air. We know you're up there, he shouted. You've got something that doesn't belong to you. The Apache's jaw tightened. It belongs to the land, he murmured. The leader motioned for his men to spread out. Gunfire cracked the silence. The first bullet struck the rock near Clara's head. She ducked, heart pounding, and returned fire. The Apache moved like the wind, every shot and arrow precise. The men below tried to advance, but the high ground gave them little chance. The fight didn't last long. When the smoke cleared, only the man in the black coat was left standing. He stepped forward, holding up his hands. You can't win this, he said. That land will belong to the government soon enough. We'll build a town here, a railroad, a future. The Apache drew his bow. This land already has a future. It just doesn't include you. The man laughed coldly. You think you can stop progress? You can't hold back the world. Clara rose slowly beside the Apache, her revolver steady. Maybe not, she said, but I can stop you. The man's hand moved toward his holster, but he wasn't fast enough. The shot rang out, echoing through the valley like a final note. He dropped to the ground, his weapon falling beside him. Silence returned, broken only by the sound of the wind moving through the rocks. Clara's arm trembled, the gun slipping from her fingers. The Apache stepped forward, lowering his bow. His voice was quiet. It's over. She looked at him, her eyes wet with exhaustion and relief. No, she said softly. It's just beginning. They buried the map in the heart of the valley, beneath a flat stone marked with her brother's initials. It felt right that it would rest there where he had fallen, where the land would keep his secret safe. When they were done, the Apache placed his hand over the stone and spoke a few words in his language of prayer. A promise. As the sun climbed higher, Clara turned to him. What will you do now? He looked toward the horizon, where the desert stretched into endless gold. I will stay, he said. This is my home. She nodded, the ache in her chest deepening. And me? He met her eyes. You carry his truth now. Take it where it will be heard. She wanted to say more, to thank him, to tell him that she'd never forget, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, firm and warm. If I touch you, he said softly, echoing the words he had once spoken, there'll be no turning back. Clara smiled faintly. Then don't let go. But when she finally rode away that afternoon, she knew he wouldn't follow. Some bonds were made not to last in the world of men. But in memory, in the places the wind carried their names by nightfall, the valley disappeared behind her, swallowed by distance and the fading light. She rode on until the stars rose, feeling the weight of her brother's promise and the pull of the life waiting ahead. The desert, wild and unbroken, stretched around her like a living thing, filled with both loss and grace. And somewhere far behind, in that hidden valley, the Apache watched her go, a silent figure against the fire-lit rocks, guarding the secret they had fought to protect. In the quiet that followed, the wind whispered through the canyons, carrying stories that would outlast them both, of love, of sacrifice, and of a land that refused to be tamed. Top of form, bottom of form.